Hi everyone, it's me, Krillius, Team Racing Productions MC and producer. And joining me today is Ravi Perry. Welcome to Team Racing YouTube Live, Ravi. How are you today?
Glad to be with you. This is fun. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, thank you. It's certainly our pleasure. And you teach at Howard University, and I know that, and I'm a former Howard student myself,
Thank
so
you.
definitely. So HU, it's really a pleasure speaking with you, especially because I know that you taught you teach the Blackware Studies program there.
Yeah, so we have a new curriculum at Howard University as we are on the pathway toward building
Mm-hmm.
a minor for undergraduate students in LGBTQ related subjects. We are not there yet, but last year was the first year that Howard University introduced in the College of Arts and Sciences a interdisciplinary series of courses related to the experience of LGBTQ people. And so we have two classes right now on the books. We have a interdisciplinary course, which is Introduction to Black LGBTQ Studies. And in the Department of Political Science that I chair, there is also a class on Black queer politics, which I taught last
Mm.
semester. And so it's exciting to be at a university that has two classes on the Black LGBTQ experience. But to be clear, we need an entire minor, if not major, on LGBTQ.
I agree. I agree, and it was such a pleasure for me to hear that these classes even existed because when I was in Cascade, that's the coalition of activist students celebrating the acceptance and diversity of equality
Come
at
on.
Howard, we had started having these conversations, and that was I was on the exec team 2 years in a row, a vice president my final year, and these were things we were discussing and trying to put into play, trying to make happen. And so I'm really, really elated that we are seeing the fruition. We've seen
Yeah,
it
well,
coming through right now.
well, and we're seeing that because that momentum is still being built
Yeah.
and led by members of Cascade today. And so
Hmm.
Cascade has really grown in that we have, of course, it's an undergraduate mainly organization at Howard University for those who are LGBTQ or non-gender loving and our allies. Non
Non-gender conforming. Hmm.
right. And essentially that's one organization. But now there's an organization in the law school as well, Outlaw.
Yes.
There's
Outlaw.
organizations in other parts of
There's one at the School of Divinity. There's one at dentistry. There's one at the grad school itself. So yeah, there are quite a few. There are quite a few that are available right now.
what would be great if we could all work together to do like some major LGBTQ kind of awareness event at Howard.
Hmm.
I certainly was beginning to plan this before COVID started, but I still am interested in hosting a nationwide agenda setting summit on this Black LGBTQ issues in America. We need to be
Mm.
clear to whom the next presidential administration will be, what our interests are globally, nationally, and locally in our neighborhoods and communities, if we as a community, of course, intend to not just survive, but thrive.
Definitely. And speaking of the upcoming elections, tell me because this is a pivotal year. This is a very, very pivotal year. So tell me about these upcoming general elections and what you would like to see, what are the changes you would love to see come forward, and what this really important election means to queer people, especially queer people of color in this country.
So nationwide, this is one of the most pivotal elections for any American, period, but particularly for marginalized Americans, particularly for LGBTQ Americans, particularly for African Americans and Black immigrants to America. We all have the responsibility to recognize that we are now privileged with the responsibility as citizens, a right that was hard fought in this country for the marginalized, whether you were a white ethnic who was Irish or Italian in the mid 20th century, or you were obviously a Black person or a Native American or Asian American or LGBTQ person or a woman, whatever you were that was othered in this country, because we do not belong in the country according to many of the historic narratives that built this nation. And so we have the opportunity every election to say, no, we do belong. We are here. We're here to stay. This is our country too. And it's not about who's been here the longest, how they got here matters, but ultimately we are all here now. And we have an obligation to see the change we want to see, but that change doesn't happen through osmosis. The change happens because individual citizens decide to, on election day or beforehand, because you could be registered now and could be registering to get your mail-in ballots and absentee ballots, and do so before November 3rd. So you don't have to take off work or wait in line or whatever else. Those are options too. You need to find those options in your area. But essentially, Black LGBTQ people have to vote. And have to participate in this election. And one thing that's great about this election nationwide, we have largest number of LGBTQ elected officials, candidates for office running now than ever before. We have the largest number of Black candidates who are LGBTQ running ever before. We're going to elect this election for the first time ever. 2 Black people who are LGBTQ are going to be elected to the U.S. Congress, the first time we have national representation in that body. And so we are really proud of that. And myself, I live here in Washington, D.C., and we have to be concerned not only about our national issues, but our local issues in our community. And I'm this close to deciding whether or not I myself am running for at-large school board in Washington, D.C., and put myself on the ballot in November. Because schools here in D.C. need attention now and need the responsiveness of people who are willing to devote their lives to seeing how students can be successful. I've done that throughout my entire life. And as a college professor, right, I obviously understand what students need in order to be successful in my classroom and classrooms like my colleagues.
Of course. And speaking of that, there's an intense debate going on now about schools reopening in the fall, what that looks like, how that will function. We saw that the administration at one point had said that if students, especially international students, which I was one at Howard, were not able to do virtual classes, then they would not be able to stay in the country and all of that. First of all, tell me, what does school look like for the fall for Howard University? And then tell me, what are your thoughts on what, as a nation, what should returning to school look like as fall, comes around?
Yeah, so the threat that you referenced in terms of the president and his administration, indicating that if you were an international student and you were enrolled in an online only program this year, that you would have your visas revoked, you'd be kicked back out of your countries. He has since rescinded that. And so, but ultimately, we each of those of us who are in higher education have, particularly in administrative roles like myself, have a responsibility to not only protect those international students and their educational matriculation here in the United States. We as a whole country, but as a world, benefit from people from all over the world coming here to Washington, D.C., but of course, all over the world to, in fact, educate in American institutions of higher education, because they then learn from the best of the best, because that's what we have here in this country. And then they go out and change the world and make the world a better place. And so that is something that we certainly want to continually encourage. But nonetheless, that has not been enacted. And so some of those fears can be somewhat subsided, but nonetheless, you should clearly hear the message that should this president be reelected, then you might, if you are an international student, might be very concerned, or if you're a brown person,
there's always a cloud above your head almost.
Exactly. Yeah. But as for this coming school year that starts in a couple of weeks, we have, of course, the number one obligation to ensure the safety of the students. And I want to emphasize not only the students, especially the students, but also the professors, also the teachers, also the cafeteria workers, also the crossing guards, also, those who are working on the lawns. Everybody who works in the school system has the right to life lived in the pursuit of happiness. And you can't do any of that if you don't have your health. And so that has to be number one priority. And so I know what places like Howard and other institutions around the country are doing is that they are weighing in terms of certainly creating spaces where some classrooms may be meeting in person, but very few, and with the appropriate 6 feet social distancing guidelines, if not more, and the appropriate face coverings, and of course, have cleaning equipment and materials and procedures that we are all obligated to follow to ensure the safety of the space for ourselves and everyone around us, and those who are coming perhaps in that room and in that classroom after us. And so this is it's a collective responsibility again, you know, because ultimately when you go into the public, anyone in the public, we are all susceptible to getting anything, which is why we have to be wearing masks everywhere. So we can't control everything, but we certainly have an obligation to minimize to the most nth degree possible any type of transmission. And if we cannot do that, if we cannot promise that, then in my opinion, we should not be allowing anyone to go on campus, and we should find a way to use this time to innovate education and help us think about ways in which we can educate online that may be challenges to us, may require providing more training resources to faculty, may require investing more in departments so they have the infrastructure to dispel this information to their teachers and to their faculty. But ultimately, we have to work together and realize that this disease is here to stay. It's not going to go away in 2-3 months. We still do not have a vaccine. We may have it in January, we may not, and even then it will only be somewhat effective, not 100% effective. And so the way, you know, epidemiology, infectious disease works, I know I live with one, I have HIV. You know, these things don't go away, unfortunately, until you have a cure. And there's no cure for COVID-19 because it's 19 for a reason, right? There's multiple coronaviruses. And so this is something that we have to learn to live with and adjust with. And if we're going to survive it, then it requires us as human beings to be reminded that we live in an interdependent world, and we have the responsibility to care not only for ourselves and our families, not only for our students and our friends, but for each other always and everywhere.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ravi. And thanks for joining me today. This was certainly a pleasure. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your opinions on all these matters. And listen, I wish the best for the upcoming school year. I know that right now it's a challenge even facing it. I mean, a year from now, tell me this, a year from now, going into whatever school year we will be doing in 2021, what is your hope? Where do you hope we will be a year from now?
My hope is that the coronavirus will, of course, be dispelled from the earth, and all of us can return to our regular habits of being hopefully productive citizens and investing in the economic engines of our local communities and having those social interactions that we all need, you know, to keep our heads up high as we, you know, do the grind every day of making ends meet. So I hope that is the case. And I also hope that we have used the time between now and then to help think about better ways to care for us in terms of our healthcare, better and newer ways to innovate in terms of how we educate, and that all the investment and effort we put into online education doesn't somehow go away. Let's be clear, I am part of the camp that believes that there's so much more to gain in many instances from face-to-face interaction, but not at the expense of your health. And secondly, but after that disease is hopefully eradicated, even then, I think there's a space for increased academic learning at the K through 12 in some instances, and certainly at the college level in the online environment. This is the way the world is growing. We are a local community, but we are also a global community. And we have, I think, those of us who are educators have the obligation to educate anyone, anywhere. And the best way to do that, the easiest way to do that, of course, is through an online medium. Education may be different in that setting, but the goal is to ensure that the outcome is the same. And we cannot ensure that in every case, I understand that, but I think hopefully a year from now, the disease of the coronavirus will be over, lives will be returning to normal, and we will be implementing the kinds of strong measures online to supplement that which we already do very well in the face-to-face environment.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And how can our audience follow you to keep up with your thoughts and musings?
My name's Ravi Perry, and you can go to my website, raviperry.com, or find me on Twitter at Twitter/Ravi Perry.
Thank you, Ravi, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, and we hope to have you again.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. To our viewers, thank you for watching. Bye, everyone.